Hey, AJ Hartley here, novelist, Shakespeare professor, baby metal fan, and this is the second part of the conversation that I had with Stephen and Kevin about the recent baby metal shows in January of 2023. But this section particularly focuses on where we think things are going. We'll probably find out soon enough, but at least until we do, here's some speculation. I hope you like it. So why don't you lead us into the big
Yeah.
Sinai reveal?
So we'll do this. We'll do this in two parts. Night one, we had a different ending. You know, Moa and Sue ascend this grand staircase that's lined by glorious red LEDs, going up and through the commie band on the stage right side from where I was. Um, Two clear coffins rise out of the stage. They take their place in front of them with spotlights. Music cuts, lights go down. Lore video talks about how they're starting their journey into the metal verse, leaving the metal galaxy, and that the show will continue on night two.
Mm.
Continue on night two, which is, kind of a big deal and an interesting way to phrase that, because usually when they do 2 night events, it's, carbon copy, that's it, see you tomorrow, that kind of thing. Continue is different. They did this at Legend Metal Galaxy. There was the light side and the dark side that was separated. And they've played with this theme before of telling one story throughout the whole time. So now all of our brains are like, well, what's going on tomorrow? So yeah, day two, concert is carbon copy. Sue performs out the gate brilliantly, no problems from that I could hear or anything like that. I'm able to watch Doki Doki Morning and experience that in all of its glory. I didn't look at Baby Metal at all. I was watching the second stage for the whole performance. We get to the very end, and it's proceeding the very same. We had been kind of, theorizing at the izakayas the night before, like what's going to happen Sunday night? How are they going to end this? How does it continue? That kind of thing. And there's all kinds of wild theories going around. So the whole time, this end epilogue. Epilogue is the word, right? That would be after the end. This is the epilogue at this point, where they walk from like the middle of the hall down the catwalk and then up the stairs to their coffins. It takes 5 or 6 minutes. It's a long process of music on the way out. So the whole time you're just like, same. I expect something to be different. It's the same. I expect something to be different. It's still the same. Okay, now they're at the top of the stairs. There's 2 coffins. It's still the same. And then it's not. A third coffin comes up between Sue and Moa's coffin, slowly and dramatically, and brilliantly illuminated by a spotlight. It reaches the top and stops. A new spotlight comes in the middle, illuminating a figure dressed as a baby metal performer between Sue and Moa. The concert ends. Lights go down. We get a new lore video. A new metal is going to be born. A new concert series is being announced April 1st and 2nd at Pia Arena MM in Yokohama. A new metal will be born. And then we get some information about when this concert's going to happen, where it's going to happen. And then the concert's over. And everybody, I've never heard this many, grown men screaming in my life. Like hugging and high-fiving and clapping and like, oh my God. I was in tears and like screaming because it's finally happening. From what we can, there's a third member. Who is it? We can speculate. That's probably what we're
We
going to do
will.
now on this on this conversation. I can tell you what I saw. So very obviously the silhouette was the same costume that we've been seeing. It was the 10 baby metal Budokan costume that we had just seen for the previous 90 minutes, that being worn by Momoko, Stu, and Moa. The hairstyle was very obviously the Avenger hairstyle. It was definitely not pigtails. It was definitely not a ponytail or anything like that. It was the Avenger hairstyle. And it was a silhouette. So that's really all we know. Let the wild speculation begin.
It's interesting. Hold on, I'm just going back over.
Okay, wait, Kevin, as AJ is looking for it, so where were you relative to the stage at this point? Because you would have been farther away from the stage then, if my understanding is correct, or?
So the second night, I also did this intentionally because I wanted to see the epilogue here, because I didn't know that it was going to happen the first night. So during IDZ, I circle pitted my way and used the pit to kind of get as close to that stage as I could by the end. So if we're looking at it, if it's on my right, I got as close as I could to that side and as far forward as I could, so I could get the best view possible. And they did put this was all very well covered by the in-screen cameras, so we could see it on the screens as well.
But a very intentionally obscured view, only giving you the view from behind.
Yes, only the view from behind is a silhouette.
Now, I mentioned this just because. I'm sorry, I was going to say, I mentioned this because some of the, you guys were farther away from the stage. The Japanese super Mushishi fans were closer to the stage.
Much closer.
Ostensibly, they could have gotten a better view, but as I was searching Japanese Twitter after the show, I didn't see anyone saying definitively they could tell who it was, even though they might have had a better view. I'm pretty sure BABYMETAL very intentionally made sure that doesn't matter where you were, you wouldn't have been able to see. I think, for sure.
Well,
but part of me also says,
stage lighting trick.
Even if you could have seen it, I don't think that actually has any relevance to what they're actually going to do in April. It could very well just be someone playing a role.
It could have been a body.
Because you see this person doesn't mean it's going to be that same person in April.
Yeah.
It's the concept of it. It's not the actual person.
I think it's completely fair and reasonable to assume that the person on stage portraying this third member was Momoko.
Sure.
Why wouldn't it be? They have somebody of the correct build, dressed correctly to perform and function in this role. Why would you dress somebody new? Why would you risk putting your third new member if it's not Momoko up there early, right? So I'm pretty comfortable in saying that the person on stage at the time was Momoko. We can speculate on if she's actually going to join or not, but I think logistically, there's no reason for it to have not been her.
And Flugelhorn, I can't say this, Flugelhorn old man specifically said that the new member was taller than Sue from his perspective.
Maybe.
I mean, like Momoko is around that height, and logistically, regardless of what happens in April, it just makes sense for Momoko to play that role as the third silhouette.
Yeah.
But again, that could be independent of who's actually there in April.
Yeah. I would be flabbergasted if it was not Momoko playing that part for this concert. I would be shocked.
But how shocked would you be if it's someone else in April, though? That's the key question.
Well, extremely shocked.
So we have a number of possibilities, right? So we have the obvious ones. It's either somebody we know or somebody we don't. This is very scientific. So it's either
or somebody we know who we don't expect.
Well,
a third.
Right.
Somebody we know but don't expect.
Yes, it could be Sarah Palin.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, she's got the big hair.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, the front runner seems to be Momoko. Mm-hmm. That's where most people. There are people who are making the case for Yui, and Kevin has already gone on record, slightly hysterically, explaining why they are wrong. I have, if you would like to hear it, I have something that I was sent, making the case for why it's not Momoko.
Interesting.
So let me just read it and you can tell me what you think. So the Return reboot has been in the works for significantly more than 2 years in terms of planning and development. COVID factor was an additional obstacle and not the underlying cause for the break, but the creation of a new album was the more important factor. The objective has been to develop new directions and to use the opportunities presented by Sue Metal's maturing vocal abilities. It was probably also a mechanism to transition back to a trio. That being the case, why would A, Momoko not be signed to a Muse to secure her position? And B, why would she have been allowed to pursue other alternatives outside Baby Metal during the past year? What if she'd transitioned to K-pop? Where would that have left them? Point one. Point two, why did Momoko only perform in the old songs, essentially just a reprise of her role in Budokan 10? Three, why did they not introduce the third member? Why did they not introduce the third member now, but instead draw out the process with Momoko already performing on stage, but without a mic? Most probable answer is that she remains an Avenger going forward. They must have something bigger than Momoko's promotion to announce on Fox Day. Only two things would be bigger: Yui's return or an entirely new member. Four, why is Yui back in the YouTube tags for the new singles, and Momoko, or any variation of her name, is not? What's particularly striking is that Yui has been put back on the tags after not having been there for Metal Galaxy. Five, promoting Momoko would not be a rebirth or restoration of Baby Metal. Yui's return or an entirely new third member would be. In terms of the lore, confusing as it is, why would they be searching for someone who's already there? The Avengers have been there all along since Yui left. Why would Momoko be the other one when she has already been present the whole time? What's clear now is that the three lights at the end of Stairway to Living Legend were not retrospective, but about the future of Baby Metal. And let's face it, there are only three metal spirits. I think Koba has been hiding things in the open, knowing the conspiracy leanings of the fan base. His final assessment is that he thinks that we're going to be looking at Yui.
I think I can rebuke. I think I can destroy all of that. Okay, so
I agree, but at the same time, I think that Baby Metal has done a very interesting job of, if in fact Yui were to return, they set themselves up that it makes sense, and they also set themselves up that it makes sense otherwise. In a sense, they haven't tied themselves to any one thing. Like, whatever the end result will be, we're going to see what happened before and say, oh, there was foreshadowing.
Right.
So,
well, that's, I mean, I read like, all the lore like that. When people get tangled, I'm just like, the lore is just, it's used to sort of paper over the cracks. I don't believe that there's a sort of deep narrative that has been anchored in place for a long time. I think
I agree it's plausible that it might not be Momoko. I mean, it's plausible it might not be her. Basically, but that's not saying, that's mostly just because they've set themselves up with so much flexibility that they haven't drawn themselves into a corner, in a sense. Like, if they wanted to, they definitely could have revealed her as the third member at these shows if they had wanted to. And it doesn't preclude them from doing it in April, of course, but it is kind of strange to have her as an Avenger role in the other one show. In terms of lore, logistically speaking, it makes perfect sense to hire her again,
And I should say that, in Southern parlance, I have no dog in this fight. I'm quite happy to wait and see, and take it from there. So, Kevin.
Yeah. So I will preface with say I have my biases, but I try and approach all of this lore stuff as objectively and try and look. What would I do as a business? What would I do as Koba Metal? What has the past taught us about what all of this? So let's talk about the first point, which I think was, why is she not signed to a Muse, and why was she allowed to pursue the K-pop thing?
Yeah.
So to the Muse point, we don't know that she's not signed to a Muse. Sue and Moa don't have a Muse profiles, and they haven't for years. They're listed as Baby Metal. That's it. So she may have had an Muse contract for years, and we just don't know that it exists. So I don't think that that's a good measure of who this could be or who it couldn't be, because Baby Metal members don't have Muse profiles. We don't know anything about their contracts. Why was she allowed to do K-pop? We don't know how long the other one has been envisioned as bringing in a third member. We don't know how long that's been in the works. Maybe, and we do know from when Yui left and there was all the discussion. I think it was actually Koba who wrote that the door is always open for her to come back, right? She's part of the family, so maybe that they weren't ready to close that door and commit to a third member. And during that time, that's when Momoko was off trying the K-pop thing, and maybe she didn't want to join. Maybe they had approached her and she said, I want to try and do this on my own. And when she failed, she was like, this is a pretty damn good backup gig. Yes, I'll do this. You know what I mean?
Well, I'll play in the NBA if I have to, but it's
exactly. And I think artistically, I understand that. I can sympathize with wanting to try and make it on my own and try and make a name for myself rather than step into a role like that. I can sympathize as an artist with her and wanting to do that. So we don't know the timeline, so I don't know how much validity I can put behind, well, why was she allowed to do K-pop? All of the Baby Metal girls, Sumo and Yui, were allowed to do things outside of Baby Metal when they were still part of Sakura Gakuen, right? They were performing in other groups. They were promoting that group. They were performing on idol stages in Tokyo, and then reassumed their personas. I don't see how Momoko would be doing anything different to what has kind of been established as acceptable in the past. Let's see, what was the second point? Why now? Or
why spoil it by using her as an Avenger again? If you're going to reveal her as a third, why not just reveal it now? That was the gist of one of the points.
For me, I put my business hat on and say, why would I hire somebody new and train them when I have somebody who's extremely capable, qualified, knows the choreography, and can literally put the shoes and tutu on and perform at the level I need right now?
Okay, what about the?
Why would I invest?
What about the tagging issue?
That one I hadn't heard before. I don't know.
Actually, we speculate. I mean, some other because Kevin is a smart person. He's only in the Baby Metal Podcast server, and I am not, and so therefore I'm in a lot of different Baby Metal groups.
Yeah,
and so this was noticed. This was noticed pretty early on, and it turns out that Yui Metal's name or Yui Mizuno's name is in a lot of videos and songs where she does not actually appear. That's just basic search engine optimization, because people search Baby Metal, they're going to search for Yui, and there's no reason why you can't show them Elevator Girl just because Yui is not in it. Now there were a few songs where she wasn't in it, but take it from me as someone who does work in marketing and social media. Sometimes there's no overarching plan and SOP that everyone has to follow. Sometimes you just miss tags for whatever reason, or whatever interns in charge of doing it didn't.
I do that with the podcast you uploads all the time.
yeah. So I don't see that as a smoking gun for sure, because her name was already existing in earlier Dark Side or whatever era songs where she was not part of the group. That's just search engine optimization.
Yeah, totally agree. I mentioned I was going to spitball on that one, and that's exactly what I was going to say. Why wouldn't you include her name? Heck, I think we still tag her on the podcast uploads. Because again, it's search engine optimization.
let me ask another question, which is in some ways easier and in some ways harder, because everybody's asking, what do we think is going to happen? Who do we think the third member is going to be? Let me ask a simple question: who do you want? Because there's this general sense out there, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but that a lot of people have particular Avengers fans, or a lot of people who are rooting for Momoko for obvious reasons because they think she's put the work in and so on. But there does seem to be a sort of baseline feeling that, of course, if we could get Yui, that would be the best thing. And I'm not convinced by that, personally. I'm far from sure that Yui could, I mean, how would we know whether she could fit the band as they currently exist? And I think some of the skepticism about Yui coming back is about an impulse within the fan base toward a nostalgia for the way the group was when it started, some of which is also a little sketchy.
I agree.
Well, I was going to say selfish, but sketchy works too.
Right? I mean, there's a, for want of a better word, a fetishization of of the way that
Yeah.
the band first appeared, which always makes me a little uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
So, and I find it very hard to divest myself of that feeling when people are saying, well, of course, it would be great if Yui came back. And I'm like, well, would it?
Yeah.
What
That's
do
also
you
part of
guys
idol
think?
culture, I think that's also part of idol culture, and they've done a very good job of trying to make themselves not idle, but I still think they're very idle in the way they operate and the way they conduct themselves and the way they sell their things and promote their product. So you get this subsection of fans. It's very normal to have your favorite. You follow that person. That's your favorite member. So and I think that's part of the fetishization. That's normal in the idol culture to have that relationship, for lack of a better word, with your favorite member. So I think a lot of the desire for the reappearance of Yui comes from that as well, for better or for worse. Who do I want? I honestly, I agree with you. I don't know that Yui's necessarily the right decision to come back. I think I can tell you my heart would love it because of the nostalgia, because that would feel normal, that would feel right. It would feel like the world is complete again for Baby Metal, right? That would be a big deal in any band, not just Baby Metal, for an original member to make a return.
It's
And
like
we've seen
Tom
that in the
going.
music industry.
It's like Tom going back to Blink 182, and
Yeah,
and that has
exactly.
massive tour results. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. But my heart would love that. But my brain, for the reasons you stated, like she's earned it. It's I think the right business choice for the reasons I outlined. Capable, already producing at the level fits the unit dynamic, as far as we know, at least from a stage presence perspective. Available, as for all we know, and from when she was younger, she wanted to be part of this group when she was younger. I don't know why that would have changed. So with given the opportunity, my brain wants to reward Momoko for this. Like I think she's the right decision, not knowing anybody else in the candidate pool. But if we're just talking about Yuri or Momoko, I think I would prefer Momoko at this point.
Stephen?
I'm a bit of two minds of this in a sense. So I think broadly speaking, I generally align with what Kevin's saying. Like there are various different reasons why all else being equal, I would prefer Yui, to be the one. Like in not just logistically speaking, but there is some sense where if it's Momoko or another third girl, she will always be living in Yui's shadow, unfairly, to her, of course. But I think that feeling will always be there, especially as you had Sue and Moa talking about, they've never set themselves up in terms of interviews and stuff to begin accepting a third girl and a new member of that. So again, they're very good at resetting expectations and setting things up with the lore so it does make sense. But part of me will always think that anyone who's not Yui, not just Momoko, any single person will always be living under that shadow, at least for some time, until they're gradually accepted. And if Baby Metal continues for another 20 years, then yeah, Yui will be the outlier, and then this third girl will be the main girl in most people's hearts. If Baby Metal, ends in, let's say, overall 15 years, they last 15 years, then I think this person would always live in, Yui's shadow. So that's one reason why, again, in one sense, it makes the most sense, for her. But I think I approach this from two perspectives. So there's the fan perspective, and then there's as a person. And that's kind of weird to say, but let me try to unpack that a bit. So from a pure fandom perspective, I would be overjoyed for it to be Yui. I loved her style of dance. I loved, her personality, so on and so forth. I think they had great. I mean, obviously, this is pretty, obvious. They had great everything, together, and it aligns with nostalgia and all that. The only thing I would have against it, and this is, I don't really care that much about Momoko or whoever paying their dues. I don't think that in of itself, I think, is a good reason to add someone to an established group. I mean, that's all props to her, but that's not in of itself a reason enough. That might be a tiebreaker. The only caveat I would have is that, Yui left for a reason. We don't know what the actual reason was. She cited health at first, but later on we know that she's recovered. And so she left and stayed away for a reason. Now, what might that reason have been? To pursue other aspects of life, And so if she is returning, we're assuming it happening, does that mean that she already accomplished her goal? Maybe she wanted to get higher education or wherever and take it seriously as opposed to part-time. Because look, we know the girls work hard, but you can't pursue, let's say, an serious academic degree in, let's say, neuroscience to the same degree that you could if you were doing it full-time. So for all we know, her job was to do something. And if she's coming back, does that mean she failed in her endeavor, or she succeeded and can now come back? I would be very happy if it was Yui and she had accomplished the goal that she had set out to do, and now she's coming back with no regrets. If she's leaving and she failed at whatever she wanted to do and she's coming back due to lack of other options, I would be sad for her from a human level, as a person, because on one hand, they're not real people to us. They're fake on stage personas. They're VTubers. They're virtual personas in that sense. They're not real people to us. But at the same time, they kind of are. And so at a personal perspective, like, I wish, that she would accomplish whatever goal that she wanted to do. It could be raising a family. It could be, doing office work. It could be anything, and if she's coming back because this is her option B, she failed in what she wanted to do, I would feel sad for her. I'd want her to keep on trying to do whatever it is away from the spotlight, if that's what she wanted to do. And if she's coming back voluntarily because she's happy, she's done, she's accomplished, now she's ready to return to BABYMETAL full time, then that'd be great. That would be my number one choice. I just find that somewhat unlikely, Yeah.
Well, and we do know she wanted to pursue her dreams as Yui Mizuno.
Right, but who knows, what that means? Is that starting a family? Is that pursuing an academic career? Yeah. Is that
exactly?
Working in a company? Like, none of us actually knows. I just don't want her to be coming back because she's out of other options. I don't think that's
imagine how
great
awkward
for her.
That interview would be.
Well, right. Yeah, I mean that's another thing. Like, because I'm the resident translator due to lack of better options in these communities, and finally, I've been sealed, for over a year, as they haven't released any new news. And recently, they've announced 2 new magazine interviews. One with PMC, and the other with, I think it was Metal Hammer Japan. And Metal Hammer Japan is a bit more hit and miss, but PMC tends to have very insightful interviews. They had a lot of great information when they came back from Metal Galaxy, and as well as Budokan. They didn't really, for example, hide behind the lore. They did talk about some of the real world issues and stuff like that. And I think at this point in their career and maturity, they would not attempt to, they could not really get away with hiding behind lore and secrecy to the extent that they might have otherwise. I think they would have to be pretty forthcoming about some practical concerns and adding a third member and all that. So I'm very curious to see, what the interviews are going to say. And of course, when I find out, you guys are going to find out when we translate it. But this is uncharted territory. But I'm so curious because it's abnormal. Yeah.
I want to come back to the Doki Doki Morning performance, though, as evidence for why Yui's not coming back. Because the very fact of them feeling the need to create a young alter ego, parallel universe version of what they were suggests to me that what we know Yui is good at is not actually what they're doing now. So when we talk about whether it's nostalgia or whatever, about how well she worked with the band, but it's like, but we're not doing those songs anymore. I genuinely struggle to imagine her on stage doing Monochrome.
Yeah.
Because her energy is not that. Now, obviously, she has evolved and changed off camera over the years. Maybe that's something she can shift into. But I think there's a paradox that the very things that the fans want from Yui can't be delivered in this incarnation.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
That's very interesting, because I actually completely disagree, which is great. We're finally getting the meat of things. What I mean is this: I totally agree with your idea that some people want the idea of Yui that might not actually exist in that sense. They want the nostalgia, and even if she had stayed with the band, it would not have been the same. Changes would have come. They would have become less kawaii or whatever, even if she had stayed, because they were turning into adults, and that's fine. But if you're talking about, what skills she had and whether that fits with current day baby metal, back in the day, both of them were as dancers. Yui was always the more technical, more, I guess, professional one in that sense. Like, she never let her like facial expressions slip and all that. Whereas Moa, like, you're supposed to be serious now. You see Yui with a serious face, and then Moa is just like, smiling her ass off, and it's great. That was an absolute joy to watch them do the same thing in very, very different styles. And so as they grew, especially during the Metal Galaxy area, I felt like Moa sort of absorbed that kind of performance style. She became even more of a professional and less of a child. I loved the childish energy, but if you look at her performances in Metal Galaxy, she had much more facial control, when to be serious, when to smile, to the point where even at 10 Benjamin Budokan, there were some fans who thought that she was smiling too fake. It's too polished. She's too good at it, to the point where she doesn't feel genuine anymore. I mean, that's kind of some of that professionalism that Yui did have when she was a kid, even as a kid. So my point is that I feel like it should be perfectly within Yui's repertoire to be able to act serious and to be able to act, childish when needed, because that was what she was good at, to a fault when she was younger. Moa was the one who was unable to hide her childish joy at everything going on around her, and Yui was the one acting like a Yui bot, on stage. So I don't think she would have any skill problems with performing older, mature songs. I think she was always able to do that if they had those songs in the first place. And again, though, it's been, how many years since you last saw her, who knows?
Well, right.
But I just think she was the more controlled and less outwardly instinctive. She was much more professional in that sense as a kid.
Yeah, I don't think I see it that way. Yes, it's about skill set, but it's also about presence, energy. And I, regardless of the third member question, it does to me raise a kind of macro question about the future of the band based on the tonality of the new songs. I mean, and I was wondering, Kevin, back to the show, when you're playing songs like Metal Kingdom and Monochrome, particularly, whether the showiness and the sort of old style, slightly goofy choreo and high energy stuff would feel tonally off. Do you know what I mean? That as the music becomes
because of Monochrome and Monochrome, they're trying to be very serious, and you have people who are literally worshiping them, and then literally like less than 10 minutes afterwards, now they're singing "Gimme Chocolate," like in the same show, right? And how does that?
But I mean, is that going to be the model going forward, or are we going to move away from some of those songs? And it just seems to me, some of these songs are very hard to switch into, given the subject matter, the content, the seriousness of them, the maturity level. I find myself sometimes wondering, what is the function of a backing dancer in this song?
That's a really interesting question, actually. You got me there, I think.
That's a really good question, right? Because like we know that in the early days, like it's been said often that Baby Metal would have been great with just Sue as a more traditional metal band, but it's all three of them together, plus Moa and Yui and their energy, that turned them from just great to the legends that they did become, because they had the visual storytelling, they had the childish energy and all of that helped infect crowds, all over the world. All three of us wouldn't be here, I think, if the first thing we gotten was a more traditional, serious, only one singer, no dancing kind of band. But is that still the same thing, the same energy they need, especially with a new style of music?
Yeah.
And speaking of music,
I don't think so.
Yeah, I
So
don't think it's necessary, but I think it's a loss if they drop it, though.
So I think they can't do what they're doing today without starting where they did. I think to answer your question and talk about what the role of the backup dancer is now versus where it was, I think when it started, the role of Moa and Yui should just to be the kawaii part, right? To be the cute part that was happening behind the music.
Yeah.
I think now we've shifted to, and we see it in the choreography, and we started to see it in the choreography for Metal Galaxy. The role of the backup dancer is helping to tell the story of the song more than
Well, they were
just.
always doing that though. They were literally, doing X's and eating chocolate
So I
and
think
running around.
I think there's a difference between miming chocolate and being a chorus dancer in a musical. If that makes sense.
I mean, no, there's a difference between miming shapes
literally
and telling the
miming
story
the
through
shapes.
expressive dance. Yeah.
Yes, and I think that's where we are now with the role of the backup dancer. More expressive, more mature, diving into the more of the thematics behind the lyrics rather than building choreography around miming eating chocolate or jumping around and being, cute kids playing tag. Which goes back to, AJ's point about the role of the backup dancer and does he fit into that anymore? And, I don't know that she does, to be frank. And that's, of course, wild speculation just because we haven't seen her in 5 years, 6 years.
Almost 6 at this point. Yeah.
Almost 6 years. Like, it's certainly possible. But, whenever I think about this stuff, I try and focus on what do we know, what has been said, with as little, room for speculation as possible. I'll start with a new metal will be born. That's what we were told. If we're returning Yui Metal to the group, how is that new? How is she being born? How is a new metal being born?
If you were Koba, though, if you were Koba and you were bringing Yui Metal back, would you still hide it by using this kind of, ambiguous language?
No.
Or would you have just said, metal will be returning and letting the cat out of the bag early, right?
No, I don't think they would have used language like that at all. I think it would have been a completely different presentation. A completely different story being told. We give the guy a lot of crap, but all of his lore has done a pretty good job of being consistent. And when you get to the end of the road, the steps you took to get there usually fall in line and make sense. So to bring a new metal in and then as a pump fake would be really out of left field from what we know and how they've operated for the last 11 years.
Sure.
So that's point number one of how, what do we know? We know that, like we've said before, Yui got hurt. They left the door open. She wrote a letter. She didn't want to come back. She wanted to do her own thing. Right? That's the last we know. Anything beyond that is speculation. So I'm leaving it there. She's not coming back. She didn't want to come back. She's had the opportunity for years, for all we know, and has not. What would be different now? Then we get into speculation. So those are two things we know. We're sticking to things we know.
Well, I was gonna add to that, where in the I think it was the Koba interview in the 10-year Kadokawa MOOC. Koba in chapter 4 or 5 did say that I had to pass her. I put the ball in her court to make the decision, and that was so close to her actual decision to leave. And then obviously at that time she did make the decision to leave, but that was up to her. That wasn't really up to BABYMETAL at that point. And of course, could she have decided to come back again afterwards? Perhaps, but that goes into the we don't know part. But we do know that they gave her the chance at that point, according to Koba.
I'll speculate a little bit. If I'm told no, let's look at this from a business perspective. If I tell somebody your job is still open, take your sabbatical, and then I give them the option, we need to move on. Do you want to come back? If you tell me no, I'm going to my HR department and saying, put the job listing out. We're moving forward. Right? And for a group that's unique in the way they present themselves through theater and storytelling and all of this, how do you rewrite the story years later after you've shut the door to include Yui Metal again?
Well, on the other hand,
right?
they very intentionally never did a third member thing. The Avengers were very clearly not third member.
I know.
Perhaps to BABYMETAL's detriment, where they just
That's what I'm
refused,
saying.
duo for a reason, I guess.
But what I'm saying from a business perspective, if Yui said no and I gave her the option and I now need to plan for the future. What does this group look like for the next 10 years? At some point, we're going to need a third member. We need to start planning for that. And I think we've been building to that since that moment. In retrospect, hiring the Avengers and getting people used to 3. And I want to use, something you brought up about who fits now. And what was it? The question was, why wait another month to introduce a third member? Why use an Avenger? And one of the things you mentioned, Stephen, was that person would always have to live in their shadow.
Mm-hmm.
When that person's always going to have to live in the shadow of Yui. However, using an Avenger who's been performing for the last 3 years with this group is extremely familiar to the fan base. It's not a shock. Everybody knows who she is. We're used to it. She's been the only Avenger for a long time now, performing. So while some people may think she's living in that shadow still, I think to the casual viewer, she has been the third member.
And I think we said
all
before,
but name, yeah.
We said before, well, Momoko's earned it, and I think there's a flip side to that, and maybe this is me revealing more about myself than I probably should. But if I was Sue and Moa, I might be a bit pissed at Yui coming back,
Yeah,
and suddenly
totally
being and having the sort of massive fan adulation, and I'd be like, well, where were you for the last 3 years when we've been working our asses off?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And that would be a very human reaction, right?
I'm sure they're better people than I am, but then who isn't?
But even amongst your friends, if I had a friend disappear for years and then want to come back and suddenly be part of I'd be like, well, I could use your help a year ago when I was renovating my kitchen or something,
I think for all the talk that we know this is a business at the end of the day, but at the same time, we also have a lot of evidence that points to the fact that they take their feelings into consideration a lot when making decisions. They can't, Koba doesn't just dictate this and dictate that. Like for me, the staying with the duo, for so long and not replacing Yui until now may very well have been in deference, to Sue and Moa. They weren't ready to let go yet.
Quite possibly.
And they couldn't force a third member on them because the girls have all the leverage. So, even if from a business perspective, Kobo was sending out resumes immediately, but if Sue and Moa vetoed it, then that's not going anywhere. And so I think that, in terms of emotions, it goes either way. It has to be something. I think my point to circle around what I was saying, which is that I think regardless of who third metal is, whether it's Momoko or a new person, whoever it is, I can be pretty confident based on their track record that I will be satisfied and happy with whoever it is because I have confidence that it's someone that Sue and Moa wanted. I think that at the end of the day, that's what matters to me. Because again, we're fans, but they are still people. You do want them to be happy to a certain extent. You don't want them to be doing things just for the sake of business interests. I want them to be happy with whoever was selected, and their track record indicates that they do care about what the girls want and don't want. And so in that regard, whoever is chosen is the best choice. Whether it's an unnamed girl who we never even thought of before, is going to be the best choice because Sue and Moa had to have okayed it.
I'm realizing that I'm going to need to get this video posted fairly quickly because it's going to date fast.
It's going to get out of date by April. Well, we got time until
April 1st.
Yeah.
You gotta get it out by
The moment when we're all revealed to not know what the hell we're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, that's the fun part, right?
Yeah. Now, and speaking of which, Kevin, you are intending to be back?
I will be back. I've already bought the plane ticket. I haven't won a ticket yet, but I'll be here.
And you've got like 4 chances to win tickets, right? You've only lost the first one, but you still have 3 other chances. The chances of you not winning one at all are pretty low, I think.
Yeah, as we're sitting here having a conversation, I'll find out in a couple of days on the second chance here. So
you're in the overseas arc right now, right? Or
overseas arc.
Okay.
Yeah, I will not be there in April because some of us have jobs.
And actual
Well,
families to take care of. And
I will say
Jeez.
for the first time, I am probably only coming for the weekend. Like
Mm.
leave America on Thursday and fly home Monday. So
That's a tough
it,
journey. Yeah.
that's going to be tough. But you know, there's just no way. Once they made that announcement, there's how could I miss this? I mean, look at what this has done to the group's online presence. Like they were trending on Twitter for days and days and days after these shows. Again, it's re-energized people. People want to talk about it. People are interested. Look at the singles blowing up over 1 million views on many of them already that they've released. So you know, it's a big moment. It's really exciting, and I'm privileged to be able to hopefully take part of it.
Yeah. Well, we have been talking for about 2 hours. I'll probably split this video into 2 sections, but any sort of closing thoughts? Stephen and I were talking earlier about we're hoping to have a Dragon Con panel again in Atlanta Labor Day weekend. Obviously, a lot will have happened by then, which is cool. It means there'll be more music
Yeah.
to talk about, lots of stuff going on. So
potentially, you know, a lot of new fans to evangelize to. You know, who knows?
Indeed, yeah. What else? Any closing ideas or thoughts or observations or things to watch for?
Yeah. You know, I will say I've been in Japan for 3 weeks now since the concert. I've
Where
had an
are you?
opportunity to. I'm back in Tokyo, actually.
Okay.
I kind of went everywhere. I just got back to Tokyo yesterday afternoon. I leave in a couple of days.
Actually, you know what? That reminds me. There was one question that I didn't get to from Jeff, and he was saying, how do foreign fans tend to manage getting around when they come for a baby metal show? Do you do a lot of research in advance? Do you are there tour groups, or do you sort of do some sort of collective arrangement, or are you just completely on your own?
You know, everybody does it a little bit differently. I kind of prefer solo travel. I like having my own hotel room. I like being able to choose my own adventure, that kind of thing. When everybody's in town for a concert, you know, there's definitely a group of us who travels all of these things as often as we can, so we know each other. We're very welcoming, and you always get grouped together, so you're going to get to meet everybody. You know, right off the bat, I would say don't be afraid to come here by yourself. Japan as a country is extremely easy to get around, particularly Tokyo or any of the major cities. You know, everything is multi-language. All of your smartphones will get you where you need to go, no problem. It's surprisingly affordable. You know, as far as tour groups and things go, you know, the various Discords and Twitters and Reddits and, you know, different ways for people to interact online are a great resource to meet people and say, hey, I'm gonna try and go to this show. What do I do? Help me out. There's always plenty of tickets. You know, until this last series of concerts, I had never won a ticket lottery, but had always managed to get a ticket to come to a show in Japan. Many foreign fans, and many Japanese fans for that matter, will enter for more than one ticket, even if they only need one, so that they can sell or give them to people who didn't win the lotteries, so that as many people have an opportunity to go and experience this can do that. So there's a great community around that. And then once you're here, you know, heck, there's a bar in Shinjuku, which is, you know, an entertainment district that's run by a Baby Metal fan. It's called the Fox God, and that's, you know, especially on you know, the week before and after a show, that's where everybody congregates. You're going to find all the foreign fans and many of the Japanese fans. You know, it's about the size of my Japanese hotel room, which is, you know, maybe 16 square meters or something like that. So you get to know a lot of people. Just, you know, don't be afraid to just dive in and go ask questions and meet. Everybody's very friendly, very accommodating.
And on your travels around, you're traveling mostly by train. You're not renting a car, right?
No.
I've never rented
I
a
wouldn't
car in
mind.
Japan.
I've never rented a car here. I don't mind driving. I've driven on the right in Europe. That doesn't bother me. The road signs and traffic markings and traffic laws here freak me out. There's a lot. I've looked
On the
into it and
left.
I'm like, I'm not, or, excuse me, yes, on the left. Yeah, it's all the road markings and things like that that kind of intimidate me into wanting to attempt to drive here. But you know, especially if you're in the big cities, there's just no reason to have a car. You can get up and down, left and right, this whole country via train, as I just did. I've done maybe 500 or 600 miles in trains traveling this country in the last 2 weeks. So very easy.
Cool. Stephen, any closing remarks?
Yeah. I've actually, well, I mean, actually, I do this, like, I know a lot of old fans in particular, some of them will still listen to Baby Metal very regularly, and some of them actually listen to very, rarely. And some of them only listen to the earlier albums, and some of them only listen to the later albums, and so on and so forth. I think I'm kind of special in that, like, I've been following them for almost, I think, 3 years now. And I don't know, for whatever reason, the music still remains fresh to me. Just today, I was actually re-listening to the first album, the studio album, because I specifically wanted to listen to their baby voices, And then I also created a Baby Metal mix of my own on Spotify, intentionally contrasting. Like, I went from Metal Kingdom to Ine immediately, and then into BMC, and then
That's
to Gimme Chocolate. I mean, the intention just to see, like, these are literally the same people. It's hard to imagine, like, the same people who are performing this are the same people who are now, metal goddesses. And I think what I was trying to put into words, it's just that, like, things change. The girls, they get taller, their voices change, their style of dance changes. But the interesting thing that doesn't change is that it doesn't matter which CD we're talking about. It could be Metal Galaxy, it could be Metal Resistance, could be the first one, could be the other one. Everything I've heard makes me feel something. It makes me smile, or it makes me feel emotional. It makes me feel powerful. Whatever they're trying to do, it still works on me. And it, like, however they change, it keeps me inspired to remain connected, with this community and other fans. And to want to do things, to want to translate, to want to interact with this amazing group of international fans from all over the place. And I think that's the thing that will never change, no matter how whoever's third girl, or if their music gets more serious, or if they tour in the US or not. Like, I think all of that is window dressing. The core of what they are, I think, is still just providing joy and unity to people around the world. And just, it's not like we really needed a reminder of that, because they've always done that consistently. But my impression, just from viewing and listening to show reports such as those provided by Kevin, just reinforced the fact that as everything changes in the world around us, this is the one thing that they don't change. And that's something that Koba talked about very specifically. Their COVID and the Budokan helped them reevaluate. A lot of us had to reassess our lives during the pandemic. What's important, what's not important, how do we change our priorities? And things shifted. And the same for them as well. They identified what's take it or leave it. But they also identified things that are absolutely core, that we cannot live without, and that Baby Metal will die without. And we have to hold on to that with dear life as everything else changes around it. And so all that is to say that I'm just looking forward to, whatever they do next. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be happy with whatever they do next. And I'm just very privileged and blessed to be able to enjoy that, with the two of you, and as well as the rest of the fan base that I really, really hope that I'm going to be able to meet in person one day. So I want to close just by saying, thank you for setting this up. AJ, thanks to Kevin for sharing your time, and thanks to the entire community. It's unprecedented. I've never been part of such a community before, and I cherish it for however long it lasts.
Truly is incredible.
Yeah. Words to live by, or at least drink by. Which reminds me, I need to do a new Baby Metal cocktail. It's time.
Nice.
Exciting.
Okay. Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate you taking the time. You guys can now go to bed. I can go to work. Excellent. And as I say, I'll probably break this into a couple of different pieces, but you'll see it online soon. So again, thank you. And Kevin, enjoy the rest of your trip, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
And that's it. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please add comments and thoughts of your own. If you haven't done so already, please like, comment, subscribe, check out my Patreon page, check out my merchandise, buy a book maybe. And I will see you soon. Thanks very much. Bye.